In a stunning revelation, King Charles allegedly explored secret legal options to abolish the British monarchy, triggering panic inside Buckingham Palace and Downing Street. A leaked memo suggests he questioned whether the crown should end with him. Royal shockwave. Did King Charles secretly want to end the monarchy? For the first time in modern British history, whispers within palace walls have erupted into full-blown allegations. King Charles III may have explored dismantling the monarchy itself from the inside. According to multiple confidential sources and a leaked 2022 internal memo, Charles held private discussions with constitutional advisors about the legality and logistics of decommissioning the crown. The phrasing was deliberate, cautious, but the implications were seismic. The meeting allegedly took place in the months following Queen Elizabeth II's Platinum Jubilee and before her passing. Charles, then still the Prince of Wales, had already taken on an increasing share of royal duties. At that time, he reportedly gathered senior aides in a discreet session, labeled only as a hypothetical governance scenario. At first, officials present believed the question posed was theoretical, but silence quickly fell when Charles pressed further. He reportedly asked, "Can the crown be returned to Parliament? Not through abdication, but through sovereign discretion?" The room froze. One witness described the mood as stunned into silence. Most assumed it was an intellectual exercise, perhaps even a moral dilemma. But Charles's next request made it clear he was serious. He wanted his legal team to explore possible frameworks. This wasn't about stepping aside. It was about dissolving the institution itself. The leaked memo documents several proposals allegedly discussed: withholding royal assent indefinitely, declining to name a successor, formally releasing the crown back to Parliament through a ceremonial act. Each suggestion danced on the edge of constitutional crisis. But Charles, long known for his reflective and reformist nature, seemed to be seeking something deeper, a way to transition the monarchy into obsolescence gracefully, rather than have it torn apart by modern pressures. Buckingham Palace has refused to confirm or deny the memo's existence, but their silence has only amplified speculation. Political sources say Downing Street was quietly briefed about the meeting. Contingency planning reportedly began behind the scenes, just in case Charles pushed the idea further. Publicly, nothing has changed. The king still appears at royal events, speaks on behalf of the nation, and represents the crown with ceremonial dignity. But behind the gilded walls, something has shifted. This wasn't the rant of a disillusioned man. It was the strategic reflection of a monarch questioning the relevance and future of his inherited role. As one senior advisor put it, Charles wasn't trying to destroy anything. He was asking the question no monarch has ever dared to ask out loud. What if the monarchy is no longer what Britain needs? That question, once whispered in private, is now echoing across the nation. The timeline. When did Charles begin pushing this idea? The seeds of King Charles's alleged desire to dismantle the monarchy were planted long before his coronation. Sources now suggest that the turning point came not after Queen Elizabeth II's death, but during her final year, in the quiet corridors following her Platinum Jubilee in June 2022. At that time, Charles was still the Prince of Wales, but already carrying the weight of an aging sovereign's duties. Those closest to him described his demeanor as unusually contemplative, detached, even restless. His speeches grew more pointed, his gestures more minimalist. There was a sense, one insider recalled, that Charles had begun to see the end of things, not the continuation of them. According to private notes reviewed by senior aides, Charles allegedly began writing in a personal diary, later dubbed the Windsor Journals, in which he questioned the viability of the institution. A dated entry from July 17, 2022, reportedly read, "We dress the crown in gold, yet starve its purpose. What if it ends with me?" That line would later become the unofficial title of whispered conversations among palace insiders. The "end with me" scenario. Charles began meeting privately with constitutional historians under the pretense of academic interest. No official transcripts exist, but 3 sources claim that 4 such meetings occurred between August 2022 and January 2023, involving experts in British governance, monarchy law, and public ethics. While outwardly preparing for a reign, Charles was inwardly dissecting its necessity. Staff noticed it too. Ceremonial details for his coronation were delayed. Royal patronages remained unrenewed. When pressed about it, Charles reportedly said, "I do not want a ceremony for tradition's sake. If we are not evolving, we are simply dressing a shadow." By autumn of 2022, subtle signs of philosophical withdrawal began surfacing in royal operations. Several long-standing court positions were left vacant. A historic family event was cancelled without public explanation. The 2023 Trooping the Color plans were mysteriously scaled down. Palace aides now believe this was deliberate signaling, a slow and silent reduction of the institution's presence in public life. The Queen's death in September 2022 marked a new chapter, but not the one the public expected. While the world mourned, Charles, now king, intensified his quiet inquiry. The weight of inheritance had not empowered him. It had complicated his beliefs even further. A senior courtier said, "He asked, if this doesn't work for the people anymore, who am I to wear it?" The monarchy to him was no longer destiny. It was a burden he wasn't sure the future should carry. The legal dilemma. Can a monarch abolish the monarchy? For centuries, the British monarchy has stood as a paradox. All power, yet no authority. Revered, yet restrained. Now, at the heart of King Charles's alleged inquiry lies a constitutional minefield. Can the monarch end the monarchy? Legally speaking, no sovereign can abolish the monarchy unilaterally. The institution exists not by personal decree, but by Act of Parliament, specifically rooted in centuries of evolving common law and statutory legitimacy. But that's only part of the story. Constitutional scholars suggest that while a monarch cannot erase the institution, they can destabilize it beyond recognition. And that, insiders claim, is exactly what Charles began exploring. He allegedly asked his legal counsel whether withholding succession or refusing royal assent could trigger a parliamentary review of the crown itself. The answer was complicated. "Your Majesty, you cannot end it directly," one advisor reportedly told him. "But you may create a vacuum so large it ends itself." Among the measures discussed, abdicating without naming a successor, dissolving the royal household, refusing ceremonial duties indefinitely, returning state privileges to Parliament symbolically. These actions, while technically legal, would plunge the UK into constitutional crisis. The monarchy, stripped of action, could theoretically collapse under political and legal pressure. A passive demolition. Palace staff, when briefed on these ideas, were divided. Some called them academic exercises, but others feared they were serious blueprints. The proposal to release the crown back to the people was viewed as radical, even dangerous. The closest historical precedent remains Edward VIII, who abdicated in 1936 to marry Wallis Simpson. But even that crisis retained succession. What Charles allegedly considered went further. It imagined a non-transfer of power. A top civil servant, who was made aware of the discussion, said, "It would be like shutting down the engine of state without warning. There are no brakes for that scenario." Conversations were held with constitutional scholars behind closed doors, some of whom believed Charles had the moral right, but not the legal authority, to begin such a process. The complexity of modern governance meant there would be no clean exit. In essence, Charles was said to be testing the limits of tradition against the silence of law. Not to rule forever, but to ask if continuing to reign still served the nation. Why would Charles want to end the monarchy? The idea that Charles, long heir to the throne, might have considered ending it has left many baffled. But to those who know him best, it's less shocking than it sounds. Charles has never been a traditional royal. He has always been a man more drawn to conviction than coronation. According to insiders, his motives weren't rooted in rebellion, but in deep disillusionment. He reportedly saw the monarchy as increasingly irrelevant in a modern world facing existential threats: climate collapse, wealth inequality, colonial guilt, and youth disengagement. The crown, he believed, was not evolving fast enough. He feared it had become a symbol of preservation, not progress. Sources close to him say he questioned whether his reign would only delay the inevitable collapse rather than reimagine the institution. Then there were personal ghosts: Diana, Harry, public skepticism over Camilla, all casting long shadows over his moral clarity. Guilt, some say, became part of the narrative. He felt the institution had swallowed too many people whole, one confidant revealed. He didn't want to be its next victim or its final shield. Others claim he saw himself as a transitional monarch, a bridge rather than a pillar. A man whose reign would not be about ruling, but about releasing. One aide recalled him saying, "If this crown is no longer a source of unity, what, then, is its purpose?" To Charles, ending the monarchy would not be an act of destruction. It would be an act of mercy. Camilla's opposition, the queen who fought to save the crown. For Queen Camilla, the mere idea of Charles ending the monarchy was not just offensive, it was intolerable. When she first learned of his inquiries, she reportedly reacted with fury. According to one palace aide, she exclaimed, "I did not survive decades of humiliation to become queen of nothing." To Camilla, the crown wasn't a burden, it was a vindication. Her path to legitimacy had been brutal. Years of public scorn, tabloid headlines, and comparisons to Diana had left scars that the title of Queen Consort finally helped heal. The thought of throwing it all away, now, at the summit of her public rehabilitation, felt like betrayal. She confronted Charles directly. Sources say she demanded he stop the consultations. "You will undo everything your mother built. This is not just your legacy, it's hers." When Charles resisted, Camilla took action. She reached out to Sir Clive Alderton, Charles's top aide, and Princess Anne, Charles's closest sibling. The message was simple: "Help me stop him." Behind closed doors, it created a quiet marital rift. While the public saw them united, insiders say Camilla became isolated, emotionally fraying as Charles retreated deeper into constitutional philosophy. She wasn't just protecting her status, she was defending the very foundation of royal continuity. A senior official put it plainly: Camilla believed in the monarchy. Charles was questioning it. That difference nearly broke them. Princess Anne and William step in. "We won't let you do this." When Princess Anne and Prince William learned the full extent of Charles's intentions, they moved immediately, but differently. Anne didn't request a meeting. She arrived unannounced, without staff or warning, walking into Clarence House with her handbag slung over her arm and fire in her eyes. Inside the king's private sitting room, she reportedly said only one thing before Charles could speak. "You don't own the monarchy. It belongs to the people and to history." Those close to Anne say her confrontation was not about power, it was about duty. Anne, born royal, shaped by duty from the cradle, had lived her entire life under the weight of monarchy. To see her brother now, poised to cast it aside, left her stunned and furious. She reminded Charles that the institution had survived war, abdication, assassination plots, and scandal. But never before had it nearly collapsed from within. She told him plainly that even their mother, in her final years, worried that Charles might not carry it forward. But no one imagined he would contemplate ending it altogether. Prince William, meanwhile, took a more quiet and emotional route. He requested a private meeting with his father. Just the two of them, no aides, no protocol. The meeting reportedly took place in the late hours of a February evening at Windsor Castle. What began with silence ended with tears. William asked his father the most devastating question of all. "If you burn this down, what do you leave George?" Charles, shaken, reportedly replied, "Perhaps freedom." To which William answered, "We don't want freedom. We want legacy." William, who had long prepared for the crown, was now staring at the possibility that the title he had shaped his life around might vanish before it ever reached him. He warned Charles that any move toward abolishment would force his own hand. He would oppose it, publicly if necessary. Anne agreed. The threat of a constitutional rift between the monarch and his heir, and his sister, sent shockwaves through the court. For a family defined by order and hierarchy, it was unprecedented. One senior courtier, present during the aftermath, said, "That was the moment everything changed." Charles saw not just resistance, but heartbreak, and it shook him. It wasn't about rebellion, it was about protection. William and Anne didn't rise to defend a crown of gold. They rose to defend a chain of meaning, one that, if broken, would never be rebuilt. And for the first time, Charles found himself outnumbered, not by Parliament, not by public opinion, but by his own blood, the government's quiet panic. When the palace liaison team finally briefed Downing Street about the king's alleged inquiries, the reaction was immediate and alarmed. No speeches, no outrage, just quiet, classified panic. Prime Minister Rishi Sunak was reportedly informed in a closed meeting with 2 senior ministers and the cabinet secretary. The news wasn't framed as a crisis yet, but it was urgent enough to trigger what insiders now call the reactivation of Operation Glass Crown. That code name, known only to a handful of government officials and palace liaisons, refers to the secret emergency protocol designed to respond if the monarchy collapses or abdicates without a succession plan. It had never been formally discussed under Queen Elizabeth II, and certainly never under a living king. Over the following weeks, top advisors held discreet meetings with MI5, GCHQ, and Home Office officials, not to monitor public unrest, but to secure palace communications and monitor internal leaks. The fear wasn't just constitutional breakdown, it was the public discovering that the crown itself was teetering on self-erasure. Insiders say Sunak was deeply concerned about the political fallout, particularly with upcoming elections and rising Republican sentiment in Scotland, Australia, and Canada. One senior advisor reportedly said, "The monarchy isn't just ceremonial, it's the final thread holding together a fragile British identity. If that unravels, everything else starts to fray." Legal teams began discreet reviews of what Parliament's role would be in the event of a non-violent royal abdication without successor designation. It was a scenario no prime minister wanted to address, yet now they had no choice. Meanwhile, whispers of unrest within the palace staff grew louder. Several private secretaries reportedly resigned in quiet protest. Others stayed, working overtime to monitor the king's behavior and intercept any moves toward public disclosure. Charles had not broken any law, but his position allowed him to destabilize the state without firing a shot. MI5 red-flagged emails and flagged encrypted messages sent between senior courtiers. Internal surveillance was expanded, not for espionage, but for containment. The monarchy had become a state security issue. Sunak's only public comment when pressed by a journalist was chilling in its ambiguity. The crown is a foundational pillar of this country, and all pillars must stand. But inside number 10, aides reportedly braced for impact. If the king made any public move toward dismantling the monarchy, it would trigger the largest constitutional debate in British history. Not in Parliament, not in courtrooms, but in the hearts of the British people, who may have admired Charles as a man, but were not ready to bury the crown he wore. The final memo? Did Charles put his thoughts in writing? Amid all the whispers, one document stands at the center of this extraordinary allegation. A paper, reportedly authored in Charles's own hand, titled "The Sovereign's Burden." The memo, never published and never confirmed by the palace, is said to have been sent to 2 constitutional historians and 1 senior ecclesiastical advisor in early 2023. The contents, according to leaks, are not explosive, but quietly revolutionary. The tone of the document, described by one recipient as elegant, sorrowful, and measured, proposes a radical rethinking of the monarchy's existence, not through drama or rebellion, but through graceful expiration. In the memo, Charles allegedly writes, "A sovereign reigns by will of the people, and if that will has faded, the crown should not resist the natural tide of time. I do not seek to be the last king, but I cannot ignore the feeling that I might be." Rather than abrupt abdication, the document outlines a 10-year ceremonial reduction plan, a decade-long drawdown of royal power, slowly returning symbolic functions to Parliament, shrinking royal estates, dissolving hereditary titles, and transitioning the monarchy into a non-governing institution of remembrance. It is not a blueprint for abolition. It is a requiem for the idea of monarchy as a living power. The memo allegedly ends with the words, "I was born into this without choice. Let my final act be one of conscience." The palace has refused to confirm the document's existence, calling it private thought, not policy. But multiple insiders say its circulation caused panic among a small circle of top aides. One historian who read it said, "It is the most haunting royal text I've ever seen. Not angry, not defiant, but filled with sorrow and clarity." If true, this document may be Charles's deepest legacy, a written confession that even kings in the quiet of night wonder if the world has outgrown their crown. The turning point: why Charles allegedly abandoned the idea. By mid-2024, everything changed. Not in the law, not in Parliament, but in Charles himself. Behind closed palace doors, the king's health had begun to decline. The man who had questioned monarchy's future now faced a more immediate one, his own. Under the care of royal physician Dr. Huan Chen, Charles reportedly began receiving end-of-life consultations. Quietly, without public notice, were cancelled. His public appearances grew sparse. Rumors circulated, but the truth remained sealed inside palace walls.
It was during one of these medical briefings, sources say, that Charles reportedly turned to Dr. Chen and murmured,
"I had ideas, but now they seem unimportant." The man who once envisioned releasing the crown back to the people began to shift, not out of fear, but out of a sense of time running out. The philosophical gave way to the personal. He met with William again, this time not as a debating heir and contemplative monarch, but as father and son. "You were right," Charles reportedly said. "There's still more to protect than to dismantle." In his final months, Charles made subtle but deliberate moves to reinforce the line of succession. He publicly praised William and Catherine, elevated George's ceremonial profile, and made no further private inquiries about constitutional restructuring. One senior aide, present during Charles's final weeks, said, "He didn't say he gave up the idea. He just realized that someone had to carry the weight forward, and it couldn't end with him." The man who came closest to unmaking the monarchy chose, in the end, not to. What it means? Now, the monarchy stands, but not unshaken. King Charles III is gone, but the question he dared to ask, the possibility he allowed to breathe, still lingers in the halls of Buckingham Palace like the faint scent of smoke after a near fire. What he explored quietly, intellectually, and almost decisively has not been forgotten. If anything, it has become the most haunting part of his legacy. The crown survives, but the illusion of its permanence does not. William, now King William V, did not just inherit the throne. He inherited the knowledge that his father, for a time, considered ending it all. That revelation has changed him. Those closest to the new king describe a man shaped not just by duty, but by resistance. Resistance to a moment in history that almost slipped through the cracks. A moment where the monarchy nearly folded itself inward. William is said to be more committed than ever to preserving and modernizing the monarchy, but also more realistic about its fragility. He knows now that the throne he sits on is not made of stone. It's made of public faith. Across the Commonwealth, the ripple effects have begun. Australia, Canada, and multiple Caribbean nations have reignited formal debates about independence and constitutional reformation. Republican leaders now cite Charles's private doubt as proof of internal obsolescence. A monarch questioning his own institution became, unintentionally, their greatest ally. Within Britain, the royal brand remains strong, but more nuanced. The public was never formally told what Charles considered, but the whispers have spread. Polls reflect a quiet shift. More people than ever now say they believe the monarchy will not last forever. Not out of anger, but from realism. The pageantry still dazzles. The military bands still play. The balcony waves still draw crowds. But beneath it all, there is now a deeper, more sober understanding. This can end. It nearly did. One courtier put it starkly, "We survived the storm, but we saw the lightning, and we know now how close it came." Even among the aristocracy, a shift has occurred. Titles no longer feel like entitlements. They feel like loans, revocable by time, by scandal, or by the very crown that bestows them. In Parliament, quiet reviews have begun over the succession to the Crown Act, examining whether clearer limits or protections need to be drafted in the event of future monarch-led constitutional ambiguity. They're not calling it reform, but they're calling it preparation. For all its gold, its ritual, its flags and hymns, the British monarchy has always rested on something far more fragile than tradition: belief. And belief, once shaken, never quite returns to what it was. Charles didn't destroy the monarchy, but he pulled back the curtain. He showed that even the oldest institutions in the world can tremble under the weight of a single question. And now, that question remains, unanswered, echoing. What if he had? He didn't end it, but he nearly opened the door.